I believe we're all born with pure potential. Over time, our potential can diminish if we become conditioned to think in certain ways. Unfortunately, we may begin to limit ourselves with negative thinking patterns. Eventually, these patterns become habits. Much like riding a bicycle or driving a car that we do automatically, we access limiting beliefs and our own inner critic just as effortlessly through cues. Instead of sitting on a bicycle, I may be looking at myself in the mirror, and that image of myself can start a barrage of self-talk. What do you say to yourself in front of the mirror? It's common language that if we think we can, and if we think we can't, we can't. And either way, you're right. If you want to improve your life in any way, then you need a can-do attitude. To do this, we begin by clearing the murk from the mind and enhancing the quality of our thinking. The starting point is for you to begin training your brain to develop flexibility of perspective, to understand why you think what you think, and to realize that you are not your thoughts. You can change what you think, therefore you can change your destiny. The key for you to unlock the future of your dreams is to have the desire to improve. Hello everybody, my name is Pamela Pitcher. Fascinated by what makes us tick, I'm a long-standing self-improvement junkie, awakener, master of neuro-linguistic programming, and hypnotherapist. Today's podcast is the first in a series of 4 about flexing your perspective. From my point of view, it's the foundation to take your life to the next level, confidently. And confidence starts with the quality of our thoughts. Our thoughts are based on our perspective. Our perspective is based on our conditioning, and our conditioning is based on our experiences. Our thoughts create emotion, and it's well known that emotion affects our health and well-being. In this series, we will explore why we think what we think and ways to develop flexibility of perspective. Each of us perceives the world through our own lens. Over time, we tend to become rigid in our thinking, and when this happens, our brain atrophies. Can you imagine an Olympic athlete who stopped training? Naturally, their skill level would diminish, wouldn't it? It's the same with brains. We need to train our brain to change. Albert Einstein said, "The definition of stupidity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results." If you want different results, you have to change the way you think. Everything starts with a thought. And think about that for a moment. You can't do anything, go anywhere, without thinking about it first. The results you're currently experiencing are a result of your past thinking patterns. Your present is a result of your past. If you don't like what you're thinking, you're probably not enjoying life so much. This world that we live in is inhabited by 8 billion people, more or less, none of whom think the same way. Not one single person thinks the same way as another, not even identical twins. And nobody's experiences are the same as another, and no one can know what another is thinking. So what causes us to think differently? When I ask people this question, they often answer it with experiences. And then I say, yes, but what experiences specifically? Because it's the who, the what, the where, the when, the how that's important and create our thinking patterns. The family who you grew up with, for example. Did you have nurturing, supportive parents? What country were you born in? What was the culture like? What did your culture, your country celebrate? Chinese New Year, the 4th of July, a quinceanera. Celebration is a strong experience. Education. What did you study and where? For how long? Did you study? Would you say a lawyer thinks differently to a ballerina or an engineer thinks differently to a writer? And what are those differences? I can think of 4 teachers in my life who had a positive impact on me. Because of them, I am a better person. They were a strong influence. Religion will affect how we think. Where did you worship, or did you worship at all? Your career, the language that you speak, or languages. Do you read and write vertically or horizontally? What's your gender, your sexual preference? A Caucasian straight male is going to think differently to an Asian transsexual. Age, how old are you? With age comes wisdom because we have many experiences, but you couldn't have told me that at 18. I thought I knew everything then. What are your hobbies? Who are your friends? What kind of politics do you follow? Are you to the right, the left, somewhere in between? And media, and more these days, social media will affect our thinking, which I do think is somewhat unfortunate, but there it is. Essentially, the spot where we were born in the world and the family that we were raised in will result in differences as to how we perceive and react to the world around us. I was born in Canada, a relatively new country in a new world. It's a social country, a country with wide open spaces populated by immigrants from all over the globe. Canada is a culturally diverse place, and it's a tolerant country. Canadians have seen no modern-day war within its borders, and I was well educated, and it was paid for by the government until university level. I had the freedom to worship anywhere that I wanted to, be it temple, church, synagogue, or out in the forest. I was taught that I could be anything that I set my mind to, as long as I worked hard enough and received the education and training to do so. It didn't matter that I was a woman or that I came from a poor family. I believed where there's a will, there's a way. Now consider a woman born in Afghanistan, a country that has been ripped apart by war for decades. This woman lives out in the country, and she's never been to a city. She's not allowed to go to school. She's not allowed to go out of her home without a male escort. When she does go out, she must cover herself with a burqa. She was married at 14 and pregnant with her first child at 15. She owns nothing in her own name. The Taliban declared women were forbidden to go to work, and so she has no career, no job to make her own money. Her husband is often violent towards her. What she can and cannot do is dictated by a Muslim hardliners' interpretation of the Quran. Naturally, the way she and I view the world is very different. There's no right or wrong in the way each of us thinks. We think based on our socialization, that spot in the world where we were born. We have learned behaviors, beliefs, and values. We think a certain way based on this conditioning, and our actions are a result of our thoughts. I used to work with the wealthiest clients in the financial services industry. I started in Vancouver, where I'm originally from. Clients came from all over the world. One day I was referred a new client who inherited millions of pounds in a trust fund from his aunt who lived in Europe. My job was to advise him on what to do with his inheritance. He showed up in the lobby of my office building for our first appointment, and the security guard stopped him before he even got to the elevator because they couldn't believe that he belonged on the private banking floor. He had traveled to our meeting on a bicycle, so he was good and sweaty, and he smelled that way too. And he was wearing, tattered cut-off jeans and a muscle shirt, and he stunk like cigarettes. I had to tell the guards to let him up, that he indeed was a private banking client. Based on his appearance alone, and probably the way he smelled, they made assumptions and they got it wrong. You see, being right doesn't count because you may be right, but it's from your perspective and one that isn't necessarily shared with anybody else. A good communication tool is when expressing your opinion, consider couching your statement by beginning with the term "from my perspective" or "from my point of view." Then, from my perspective, you won't come across as righteous, a know-it-all, condescending. When we communicate from the perspective of "I'm right and you're definitely wrong," it's a rapport breaker. It can result in making the other person feel annoyed, feel small, and potentially lead to arguments. Remember, we think what we think is true. Just because it's true for you doesn't make it true for anybody else. When I was 19 years old, I tried my hand at fashion modeling. I went through a lot of training and spent considerable time and money on my portfolio. With my portfolio in hand, I would visit photographers in their studios to try and get work. Those meetings were called go-sees. My agent would call up and say, "Pam, I have 3 photographers for you to go see today." I wasn't confident as a product, so I didn't enjoy go-sees. I was simply hoping to model so I could travel with work. One day I had a go-see with a very handsome photographer who was one of the busiest in Vancouver. With fingers crossed, I entered his studio as I prayed to myself, "Please give me some work." He quickly flipped through my portfolio, put it down on the table, and then stared at me from across the table. And then he said, "Your hair's all wrong. It's too wild and curly, and your lips are too small. Your smile isn't very good. Your teeth aren't white enough. Your eyes are too close together. You're not thin enough. You're not tall enough. Your hands are awful. Your fingers are so small." And on he went. He didn't say one good thing about me. I was absolutely devastated. When I got outside his studio, I began to cry. I beat myself up really badly. Not long after that, I gave up the idea of being a model because I believed what he said to be true. A couple of years later, I was at a party. There he was, surprisingly, across the room. He saw me and he came right over and said hello in a friendly fashion, which surprised me yet again. He looked at me and he said, "I remember you. You came to see me in my studio the day after my girlfriend broke up with me. I couldn't get over it. You looked just like her." I learned a big lesson at the party. Note to self: never assume that people are reacting to you in a negative way. More often than not, their reaction has nothing to do with you. It's their stuff, not yours. Taking criticism personally does nothing to help you. It's helpful never to make assumptions and act on what you know to be true. And from then on, when anybody criticized me, I looked across at the person. Did I respect them? Did I want to listen to this or not? I made the choice. You are who you are today because of your genetic disposition, your personal history, your patterns of thought, many of which were passed on to you by your caregivers, by the way. And none of that matters nearly as much as the person you desire to be. Begin to see the world through different eyes and flex your perspective. There's a whole world out there that you've never seen, yet it's always been right in front of you. Start dreaming big and fill yourself up with the desire to change. That's your focus from now on. Thank you so much for listening, and please tune in next time for part 2 of the Flexing Your Perspective series to awaken to the best you. Please remember to subscribe and share across social media. I'd really appreciate that. And I'd also love to see your thoughts, so please send your feedback my way so I know how to help you the most. Thank you again. Ciao for now.